Hello, denizens. Here we go. Former Network Executive Reaction TV Guide Fall Preview 1975. But first up, famous historical events that took place in the year of the guide. It's always nice to put these new shows into the context of their time. First meeting of the Homebrew Computer Club. Bobby Fischer refuses to play in a chess match against Anatoly Karpov. Microsoft is founded as a partnership between Bill Gates and Paul Allen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I love saying Albuquerque. The first game of the Philippine Basketball Association is played. The Vietnam War formally ends. Sony introduces the Betamax video cassette recorder in Japan. Junko Tabei becomes the first woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Mozambique achieves independence. Steve Wozniak tested his first prototype of the Apple I computer. Jimmy Hoffa disappears from the parking lot of the Manchus Red Fox restaurant. The Rocky Horror Picture Show opens at the USA Theater in Westwood, Los Angeles. The Sinai Interim Agreement relating to the Arab-Israeli conflict is signed. Patty Hearst is arrested. The NBC sketch comedy variety show Saturday Night Live debuts with George Carlin as the host and Andy Kaufman, Janice Ian, and Billy Preston as guests. And finally, East Timor declares its independence from Portugal. Now, let's get on with the TV Guide Fall Preview 1975.
Changes. This fall, Sally Struthers is the all-in-the-family holdout, and so the character of Gloria has been written out of the first 4 shows. The Bob Newhart Show, Carol, the receptionist Marcia Wallace, is going to get married to Larry the travel agent. The Carol Burnett Show has hired Tim Conway for regular duty. Happy Days unveils Pat Morita as the owner of Arnold's Drive-In. The Jeffersons have changed Lionel's. Damon Evans is replacing Mike Evans. No relation. Harry Morgan is joining MASH, replacing McLean Stevenson. On to the shows. Warning, my bag is sitcoms, but I'll stop to talk about other shows that I find of interest. Saturday Night Live with Howard Cosell on ABC. Skipping that one. Doc on CBS. Don't care. Matt Helm, ABC. The TV version of Dean Martin's terrible Matt Helm movies. If you want to know more, look it up yourselves. The Family Holvac on NBC starring Glenn Ford. Let's see where this turkey is in the schedule. Right. Up against the $6 million man in Cher. This is what we call in network parlance roadkill. It was put out of its misery after 10 episodes. Bronk. Really, CBS? I love Jack Palance, but this detective show lasted only 1 season. Swiss Family Robinson on ABC. Holy hell! The only thing of note here is that it starred Martin Milner and a young Helen Hunt. Lasted 20 shows before they were eaten by wildlife. I hope the next one is a keeper. Shit. 3 for the road on CBS. This Alex Rocco stinker survived 13 episodes. Not feeling optimistic about the next one. NBC's McCoy, starring A-list movie star Tony Curtis. Let's at least do Tony the Courtesy. Did you see what I did there? Courtesy. Never mind. And read the storyline. McCoy has expensive tastes with an equally costly lifestyle offset with a gambling problem. To make ends meet, he becomes a con man, relieving others of their ill-gotten gains with the aid of Gideon, a nightclub comedian. Any bets on how many shows this lasted? If you rolled a 5, you'd have been right. And don't forget, folks, these are the winning shows the networks picked over dozens of other pilots that were apparently worse. And now here we come to the ever-popular David McCallum starring in NBC's Invisible Man. For crying out loud, didn't these actors have agents advising them? I absolutely have to read this storyline. Dr. Daniel Weston was a scientist working with a government think tank known as the Clay Corporation, who was rendered invisible by a formula concocted by himself that was supposed to be used for matter transformation. Before he can return to normal, Weston discovers the federal government has plans to use his invisibility formula for warlike purposes, so he destroys the only formula. Unfortunately, he has no way to become visible again, so, wearing a very realistic face mask and hands, he becomes an agent for Clay, fighting crime and battling saboteurs while simultaneously working in Clay's laboratory with his wife Kate to rediscover the formula. The Invisible Man completely disappeared after 13 episodes. Phyllis, CBS. Mary Richards' landlady, Phyllis Lindstrom, moves back to her hometown of San Francisco with her teenage daughter Bess following the sudden death of her husband Lars. She intends to make a new life for herself and her daughter by moving in with Lars's scatterbrained mother Audrey and getting a new job as an assistant at a photography studio, starring Cloris Leachman, Henry Jones, Jane Rose, and Lisa Garriston. Lasted 2 seasons.
Sample episode. Bess goes on a weekend ski trip. Phyllis calls her, and a boy answers. Hysteria ensues when Phyllis assumes Bess has gone all the way. They gave it the good college try, even reworked the locations, dropped characters in season 2, but this show never worked for me, at least. They had to surround Phyllis with characters even more annoying than her. And while Stan Daniels and Ed Weinberger were the creators, there was no way to make the uninteresting premise work, even with the prodigious comic skills of Leachman, who I think her finest work was Frau Blucher in Young Frankenstein.
Barbary Coast, ABC. 19th century government agent and master of disguise Jeff Cable operates out of a secret room in a San Francisco casino owned by his best pal, Cash Conover. Conover is sort of a dandy and would rather avoid trouble at all costs, but Cable's persuasiveness coupled with Cash's sense of duty and a weakness for the fairer sex shared by both men usually leads them into dangerous missions, starring William Shatner, Doug McClure, Richard Kyle, and Dave Turner. Lasted 14 episodes.
Sample episode. When a pair of jade cat statues are stolen, Jeff Cable goes undercover as a mercenary reporter to recover them. What's a mercenary reporter? And it's up to Cash Conover to see that his friend survives the experience. I only have a vague recollection of this show, and I'll bet you have none. I was shocked when I saw the Shats in this one. It was his first live-action series since Star Trek. It was kind of a Wild Wild West ripoff, which saw Shatner don all sorts of disguises.
Seriously, I'm not discussing Beacon Hill. This CBS soap opera about a rich family from Boston in the 1920s lasted 11 episodes. Welcome back, Kotter. ABC, a compassionate teacher, returns to his inner-city high school of his youth to teach a new generation of troublemaking kids, starring Gabe Kaplan, Ron Palillo, John Travolta, Marcia Strassman, John White, Robert Hedges, and Lawrence Hilton Jacobs. Lasted 4 extremely painful seasons. Yeah, I know there's lots of you who love this.
Sample episode. Instead of the planned food fight, Kotter convinces the Sweat Hogs to stage an all-night classroom sit-in to protest the school's serving of liver for lunch. Teachers in other cities had concerns about how Kotter would be portrayed, so producers allowed a union representative, a teachers' union representative on the set to ensure that the show protected the image of those in the teaching profession. Kaplan, of course, opposed the idea, at one point asking a reporter if there was a junkman on the set of Sanford and Son to protect the reputation of junkmen. What can I say? I didn't find this show funny, did not find Kaplan funny, but it did start the trend of stand-ups who were the worst actors in their own shows, which Seinfeld carried on. At the time, I did look a lot like Horshack.
Joe Forrester, NBC, Los Angeles Cop Show. Even starring the popular Lloyd Bridges could not save this show. Lasted 1 season. Switch, CBS. Former bunco detective Frank McBride joins forces with a con artist he once sent to jail, Peter Ryan, to operate their own private detective agency. Most of their cases involve running cons on the bad guys in order to trick them into surrendering or revealing the whereabouts of the stolen loot. Starring Eddie Albert and Robert Wagner. Lasted 3 seasons.
Sample episode. The treasurer of a retirement home takes the money and runs away to Brazil. The owner asks Pete and Mac to get the money back or the home will be shut down and the residents will have no place to go. Since the man can't be extradited, Mac and Pete decide to con him by pretending to have a diamond mine they want to sell. This show was a lot of fun, actually. The chemistry between Albert and Wagner was great. It was a combination of The Sting and The Rockford Files. And in fact, James Garner accused the producer, Glenn Larson, of stealing his scripts.
Joe and Sons, CBS. Working-class widower Joe Vitale is raising his teenage boys Mark and Nick in Hoboken, New Jersey, with help from his Aunt Florence. Proudly Italian-American, he hangs out with pal Gus and neighbor waitress Estelle, starring Richard Castellano, Barry Miller, and Jerry Stiller. Lasted 14 episodes.
Jesus, do you really want to hear a sample episode? Okay. Joe is enraged when he discovers that his 12-year-old son's biology book contains an explicit section on sex education. Yeah.
When Things Were Rotten, ABC. A comedy made in the style of a Mel Brooks movie that is set in Sherwood Forest, in which Robin Hood, Maid Marian, and Robin's band of merry men are struggling heroically against their rotten foes, nasty Prince John and the Sheriff of Nottingham, starring Dick Gautier, Dick Van Patten, Bernie Koppel, Richard Dimitri, and Misty Rowe. Lasted half a season.
Sample episode. Sheikh Ahmed comes from Arabia to sign an olive oil treaty with Prince John, but demands the hand of Maid Marian in marriage as part of the deal. Oh boy, this was a hugely anticipated show for me. Another Mel Brooks comedy like Get Smart. Unfortunately, it really was rotten and not very smart. It was so dumb that even I didn't enjoy it. I can't tell you what a disappointment this show turned out to be.
I think we can skip Kate McShane. Another 12 episodes and out CBS drama featuring Ann Mira. What the hell is going on with 1975? Although the show description is hilarious, Kate is a lawyer. Her ex-cop dad is her investigator, and her brother Eddie is a Jesuit priest and professor of law. But there is no dissing Starsky and Hutch, ABC. Tough detective Sergeant Dave Starsky and educated detective Sergeant Ken Hutch Hutchison are plainclothes cops taking on dope dealers, muggers, and other thugs, aided by their souped-up red and white 1974 Ford Gran Torino and informant Huggy Bear, starring David Soul, Paul Michael Glazer, Antonio Fargas, and Bernie Hamilton. Lasted 4 tire-burning seasons.
Sample episode. A pair of small-time crooks steal a car, not knowing it has a bomb in its trunk set to detonate at 5 o'clock. Not 5:05. Starsky and Hutch have to do detective work on a deadline, locate the car, color the crooks, and beat the clock before it blows. Great show with a dirty secret. The Ford Gran Torino was an automatic, but they added stick shift gear change sounds in post.
I hate to skip over anything starring George Peppard, but Doctor's Hospital on NBC barely made it halfway through the year before being taken off of life support. And so we come to the Montefuscos, NBC. Tony and Rose preside over their large family that enjoys eating and arguing. There is Frank, who's married to Teresa, priest Joseph, and the baby Nunzio. Their daughter Gina is married to a non-Catholic, which provides conflict. Starring John Apria, Ron Carey, Phoebe Doran, and Linda Dano. Lasted only 9 sweet mother of Jesus episodes.
Sample episode. Nunzio is happy with his new girlfriend, Blossom, until it's discovered she once dated his brother Frank. I have nothing more to add. I just want to get out of this 1975 hell.
Ellery Queen on NBC. While this lasted only 1 season, I remember enjoying the performance of Tim Hutton and David Wayne. Perhaps the show was a bit too sophisticated for primetime. Faye, NBC. After 25 years of marriage, Faye Stewart was forced to start her life over again after a divorce. She moved into a new apartment, started a new job as secretary to lawyers Danny and Al, and began dating, much to her daughter Linda's consternation. Starring Lee Grant, dead after 10 shows.
Sample episode. Oh, why bother? Lee Grant was so mad at NBC for pulling the show so quickly that she slammed NBC on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show.
On the Rocks, ABC. Alamesa Minimum Security Prison has 4 inmates in a friendly rivalry with their guards and warden. Starring Rick Hurst, Jose Perez, Hal Williams, and Bobby Sandler. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode. Warden Poindexter is intent on cracking down on gambling in the prison and takes extreme measures, but the ban has the opposite effect on Fuentes, making him want to gamble even more. This was the US version of the hugely successful British sitcom Porridge, produced by BBC, and obviously not so successful over here.
Big Eddie, CBS. Big Eddie Smith was the owner of New York's Big E Sports Arena. Smith was also an ex-gambler who was trying not to get sucked back into the racket while dealing with the various crazies and eccentrics that crossed his path. He lived with his ex-stripper wife, Honey, and their granddaughter, Ginger, starring Sheldon Leonard, Cherie North, and Quinn Cummings. Lasted 10 shows, not surprisingly.
Sample episode. Hungarian aristocrat Margaret, Eddie's first wife, come to town to compete in an equestrian event. Her style sets Honey on edge and creates problems for Eddie. I mention this episode, I picked this episode because it starred Eva Gabor, because my parents were Hungarian. Wow. This might be the worst year for shows of all the TV guides I've done so far. And as painful as it was for me, I at least hope it was instructive for you as to just how difficult this business was and still is today. These failures were littered with well-known performers and experienced writers and producers. I've always found it amazing just how hard this business is. Yet, once you get it into your blood, it's hard to stop. Do you have any fond memories of any of the shows from 1975? Leave a comment. Till next time, denizens, be seeing you.